Hello, this is Sudhakar Moparthy. Today, we're going to do something different. I want to review a little clip of Richard Feynman, one of my heroes, who is a legend in explaining things in a very simpler manner. He's a theoretical physicist, Nobel Prize winner, Richard Feynman. So let's see what he has to say about a simple act like counting, um, and what goes in your head, and how we communicate with others, and it all to do with how in the head you are encoding this information and keeping track of things and stuff like that, kind of neuroscience. um, I just want to play a small clip, and then I will correlate that with our C1C2 diagrams. Richard Feynman is known for Feynman diagrams. So that's kind of an inspiration for me to create these simple C1, C2 diagrams to explain and connect the ontology of the knowledge that we try to understand in my videos. Okay, let's see.
Operation of counting. The great difference in what goes on in the head. But people think they're doing the same thing. Someone's struggling perhaps already true at the most elementary level. And if we learn the mathematics and the exponentials and the electric fields and all these things, that the imageries by which we're storing it all and the way we think about it could be introduced to each other's heads entirely different. In fact, why somebody sometimes has a great deal of difficulty understanding a point which you see as obvious, and vice versa. Because it's a little hard to translate what you just said into his particular framework and so on. Now, I'm talking like the psychologist that you know, I know nothing about this. Suppose.
All right, so that's a small clip. Now, basically, what he's saying is that what goes in the other's head, we don't know, and so it's how they are encoding, and it may be they're encoding in different ways. So, what I'm trying to do here is to come up with a simple way to describe things to the machine, like a C1, C2 diagram. Let me draw a couple of them now. And so for example, you have HTTP request, okay, and it has certain methods that when you make a request, you can use certain methods, the get, put, post, the kind of methods. So I'm going to show the relationship between these two. So all I do is at that point, I say this is a HTTP request, okay, that I'm trying to make, and what type of method that I want to use. And I'm going to use my stars to represent is a request, a second request, a third request, and then there are what type of methods are available when you make HTTP request: a get method, a post method, delete, and a put method, let's say. So now I'm going to draw some arrows here. From here, this first request, maybe it's a get request. Let me type that, get request. And this is a post request, post method type. And delete and put. So now all you have to do is connect some requests to this method type. So this represents our post request. Okay. And this may be again another get request. So here all I just did was draw some objects representing HTTP request, and draw some objects representing different methods, and I created a map using arrows. So simply looking at it, what you would know is HTTP request can be made using 4 different type of methods, and you can choose one of them. And that's it. That's a concept called HTTP method. The concept of posting or getting, and the relationship between the request and the method. We believe in the brain, these are nothing but neural connections, and this is how the information is stored. And what I'm trying to do here is load this model, these 2 classes. I call them as classes because now let me use my invisible pen to draw some. So I call this as C1 class 1, connected to class 2, which is method C2. And that's why the name C1, C2 diagrams. Okay. All right. This is just some sort of a motivational video today. And I will wrap it up with the ChatGPT example that I was trying. Let me share that and then show you what I was trying to do here. Okay, so what I did, I took this example, how S3 select, we can filter the data. Let's say you uploaded a JSON or a CSV file into S3 service, S3 bucket. Now, you can get that object by making a request. So instead, if you want to do a query, because it's a CSV file or a JSON file, I can use S3 select, like SQL-like type of query, and retrieve certain data and format it in a CSV file, comma separated values. That's a feature. Some other day we will talk about in detail, but that is what I was trying to make a video on, and I was trying to go through this, and then suddenly I realized it looked a little bit more complex. So then I said, okay, let me go to ChatGPT and copy this part of the text, okay, and then paste it, and then see what ChatGPT will say about it. Okay, so this is what I did. I just pasted in ChatGPT, and it said, this looks like, okay, let me clear this c1c2 diagram here. Okay, so then it said, this is an HTTP request, yes. So the post is indicating that the client is making a post request to the S3 service with a key specified in the URL. The select and select type parameters suggest that the request is intended to perform a selective retrieval of data. So basically, you post and request a URL object key, and it will give you some data by filtering that CSV file that you uploaded, JSON that you uploaded. And where is it available? Which bucket? This is a host header. And this is the encryption algorithm, how it needs to be, because this object may be encrypted and stored. So then you have to say what algorithm is used, and then, and if it is encrypted, what is the key with which it is encrypted, so that S3 service can decrypt it and do a query and then return the data. This header is used to MD5 checksum of the encryption key, and this is used Amazon S3 to verify the integrity of the key during the transmission. Okay, so there is some other headers, that it is specifying, and it just explained each one of these. Then I said, okay, give me a sample program to make a REST API request. Because I want to make a API request, REST, and do a query. So it gave me a Python program. So it's a simple URL. That's the endpoint. And then this is the parameters, key value pairs. So this key value pair concept we already talked about. So it comes all the time in different forms. Here, parameter, name, and value. So we pass certain parameters, inputs, and we pass some headers. All these are headers. Like, so we pass some headers, and then we use requests.get method and pass those parameters and headers and get back our response. So in order to do this request and response, we need to have a library. So we are importing that requests. So if the response comes back with 200, which is means successful, then you're good. Otherwise, you print. So that's a decent code. It just wrote that entire code. And it is saying, in this example, we get a GET request, passing the two parameters. And if it is successful, it will print, and that's it. Then I said, give me a sample for the post request above used for S3 service. So I wanted to use that S3 service request. Then it imported those required libraries to connect Python. We are using Python here. It wrote the code to create a S3 client, and so that we can make a request and get the response. So it's using that Boto3, and then some other libraries, hashlib and base64 libraries. So we got our bucket name, and this is our object that we are trying to make a request. And then this is the data that we want to put. Okay, this is an example where you're trying to put something in the S3 bucket, encrypted. So it is using MD5 and it took library to create MD5 object to create the hash key for that data, and then using that so that it can encrypt the data using that key. And it creates a client, Boto3 client, and this is the line that is responsible to create the client. And then you post, passing those bucket and the object, the encryption algorithm, and the key. And body, because we are making HTTP request, we're passing that data. What is that data? Some data. This is a data that will be posted to the S3 object. This is just a line that we will be saving it there. So we get the response, and then if it is 200, then it's good. Successfully posted the data to S3 object with that key. Then I said, okay, so it said you will need to install the Boto3 library and provide AWS credentials for this program to work. So if I want to make this program work, I need to install Boto3 library. Then I said, where would I specify AWS credentials in the Boto3 installation? Then it said you can do that in the file AWS credentials in the folder .aws/credentials. So if you put this, okay, to connect it to AWS, you need access key and secret key. So those you can easily create in IAM service. So you can create in the IAM service for that user. You can create an access key and a secret key, and give that user permission to post to S3 buckets. So those are the two values strings that you can get and put it here. So you can and it said you can make the Boto3 read these. And let's read this. With your actual access key, replace these two values with your actual key, ID and secret key. Boto3 will automatically pick up these values and use them to authenticate the request, because unless you have this, it cannot. So when you install Boto3 and then you update that file in that installation, then it makes sense. You need a principal to make a request, and that is how you make that request, and then everything is good. Then it said you can also specify in config default region. Okay, if nothing is specified, you can it'll take a default region, and or you can maintain in this config different profiles, and then maybe one region for one and the other one for the other, like that. This is another config file. And then if you want to use the default, just simply create the client. And if you want to use a specific one, use this constructor, S3 profile name and region name, and then it will use this other section of the config file. So this is another concept, how when you are running programs to pick up different profiles, we can define in config and pick it up. At the end of the day, all the pieces of information needs to be given for a program to run successfully. So different ways of giving this information. So config files and securely storing them, sometimes encrypting them, and some stuff like that. Okay, then I said explain. Okay, there is some line here. MD5, hashlib, MD5 update, encryption. So I just wanted to test, okay, what are these three lines really, So I asked it to explain how the following code works. Then it started explaining every single line. This code is using hashlib and base64 Python libraries. They are Python libraries. So now it's all about using some libraries, and in those libraries we have some functions that we can call and do our work, which can be used to encrypt the data using server-side encryption. So now it's explaining each line. Creates a new MD5 object from the hashlib library, which can be used to generate MD5 hash of some data. What is MD5 hash? We can go much more deeper, and we can keep on asking ChatGPT. But if you read this, it's pretty good. Later, at some point, we will explore all these things in detail. But I just want to show you guys, there is a base64 string concept, encoding and decoding, and those as strings, because the encryption key that we have to supply is a string. Then I said, okay, explain me headers in REST API request. Then it wrote all these sample headers. We already saw some of the headers. And then it said the headers are basically a metadata, Headers are additional metadata that is sent along with the requests to provide additional information about the request. So one of the things is accept. Specify the format of the response. When you make a request, you get the response. And what format you want it. So this is the format I want. Content type. What type of content am I sending in this request? JSON. User agent. Which browser are you using? You're sending it as part of your request. And like that, more headers can be sent. Then I said to my original post, copy paste, okay, explain me in more detail, just this line. This is how you learn in using ChatGPT. You don't understand something while you're reading, just ask it. By giving a better prompt, it will explain in much more detail. Okay, this line is request, HTTP request. We already know that it is a HTTP request. So it's breaking it down. What is post? That's the method. That's the c1c2 diagram we just saw today as part of our explanation of c1c2 diagrams. Post, request, and that method, HTTP method that is used to make a request is post. Key plus is the URL that you are requesting. And that curly brackets, in the later prompt, I asked it, what about this and all that. But it's basically you replace that with that URL that you are requesting it. And some additional parameter values that you are sending. And what protocol you are using when you are making that request, HTTP 1.1 protocol. Version number, that's which is widely used version of the protocol. Then I said, why did they write key plus, specifically the plus sign? Please explain. This is fascinating. The key plus is the URL specifies a variable part of the URL that you have to replace. In this case, indicating that the client should replace key plus with the actual key of the Amazon S3 object wants to interact with. I'm trying to interact with an object on S3. I installed Boto 3. I put my credentials. Now I want to get that object and then do a query and get a part of that data which is there in that file. So the plus sign example following the variable name is known as a wildcard. So that means I can give the object name as a partial object name. That means all the matching ones. For example, if the client wanted to interact with an S3 object with the key example dash object, so let's say that is my object key, example dash object, then I could just simply replace that with that. However, if the client want to interact with any object that started with example, then you replace that with a star, which would match any character of characters that come after example. In summary, the plus sign is used to indicate that one or more characters can be included in the key. And it allows the client to specify for a more flexible and generic key pattern that can match multiple objects with similar key names. So basically, it's saying just to specify that wildcard thing that you don't have to give an exact match. You can give a partial name of the object key of the S3 object so that it can match all those things and then do that query and then extract and then give you the response. So that's all I did to test ChatGPT and how I would learn. So now this is so powerful. ChatGPT and the ability to break down using C1, C2 diagrams. Basically, you have to construct those relationships with this combination and that model that I'm drawing, C1, C2 diagrams. When they are imported into SKillbanc, they become objects like, let me go back here. So these are all objects. So this is a task that I was trying to do and for today's video. So I put that, I had my reference way of thinking video, and I can write some notes for this task, and etc. etc. So all this in SKillbank, all these objects, I kind of see a lot of parallels um, here, the way I'm thinking, object thinking, and the way S3 objects are also behaving. So in the world, they're all objects, and one is connected with other to form a structure, and that bigger object is connected with other objects of of a different kind to form a different type of object. Like that, you keep building the structures. And if you want to understand something, you need to understand that structure and the relationships. And that's what my whole idea of drawing these C1, C2 diagrams. All right. Thanks to Richard Feynman. And if you guys are interested, I'll put this link in the description and you can watch the full video on this. But I thought today I would do a different kind of video. Thanks a lot. And I'll see you in the next video.